I'm Katherine Flashner, and this is The Truth Is, a podcast about discovering what it means to live your truth, even when it's messy, when it unravels the plans you thought you had, and invites you to step into the unknown. Each week, we explore practices, stories, and conversations that illuminate the ways we find and follow our own path. This is a space to slow down, ask questions, and uncover what's been quietly waiting inside of you. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Truth Is. Today, my guest is Sarah Spoto, the founder of Badii, a community platform and soon a physical bathhouse inspired by Swiss bathing culture. Sarah and I met just about a decade ago in business school, and she went on to pursue corporate leadership roles, launching brands and businesses, most notably at Cadillac, where she worked for nearly a decade. That work eventually took her abroad, first to China and then to Baden, Switzerland, a spa town known for its mineral-rich thermal waters. And it was there, reeling from the chaos of the pandemic and exhausted from years of climbing the corporate ladder, that she found herself in the middle of a paradox, depleted yet surrounded by a culture built on ritual, restoration, and connection. Through those waters, she discovered a truth, that wellness shouldn't be a luxury, but a daily practice rooted in health, nature, and community. It was a seed for her next chapter, leaving corporate to start Badii, her own company dedicated to inspiring curious bathers, sharing the history and integrity of global bathing culture, and creating accessible, welcoming spaces for connection here in the U.S. In our conversation, Sarah reflects on the lessons of her corporate years, the choice to trust her readiness to begin again, and the power of building success on her own terms, guided by a ritual that revealed a new way forward. So with that, let's get into it. I'm so glad to have this conversation with you, Sarah. Welcome to The Truth Is.
Thank you.
We met a decade ago now, which is so wild.
Oh,
and
yeah.
we went through business school together, and now we very fortuitously, and it feels like so kismet and aligned that we're reconnecting as we both finish 8 years in the corporate world. I am so excited to talk to you about what you're building and where you are professionally and personally. And really, the central question I have that I'm bringing into my podcast is, how do we evolve what success and fulfillment means to us as we evolve personally? And so I'm just so excited to have that conversation with you. I wanted to start, though, with going back to, and I'll start here. I was thinking about you 10 and 8 years ago when we were in business school. And one thing that I always admired about you that I can't say was true for me at the time was just you emulated this sense of, I know who I am and I know why I'm here. So you had this clarity of who you were and what you were going for. And also you had, to me, this sense of allowing yourself to be you and not trying to be some idea of what success was. And so I want to go back to that space and ask if you're nodding. So I'm that feels true to you.
Yeah.
So go back to that 10 years ago, entering grad school together. What was your mindset then going into this huge personal investment in your personal and professional development?
Yeah. Well, I'm nodding because people say that about me a lot. And I think it's funny because I just don't think about that. But yeah, I was talking with somebody else recently, and same kind of piece of feedback. And I just think it's funny, but thank you. And I appreciate that. I think probably I come across more like I have my stuff together more than I actually do. But going back to your question, my mindset going into business school, which was a decade ago at this point, I had just come out of a corporate career, a very short-lived one, 3 years in the fashion industry. And I was already feeling quite beat down by that experience, partially because, it was like there is always a transition from whatever you're doing, whether that's coming out of grad school or undergrad to corporate. I don't think corporate is natural in terms of like how we work. And certainly it's more unnatural for certain types of people. I think entrepreneurial people, creative people, can have a harder transition into corporate. The politics, the mask that you have to wear, some of the things that don't feel very logical that you have to do to be successful in corporate can take a transition. And I really loved what I was doing. I was basically a buyer, or really how I frame it is like a product manager. So owning like the product life cycle of fashion products. And I loved the job itself, the role itself, because it was both business acumen as well as creative. And you got to work with both creatives, the stylists and the trends forecasters, as well as, looking at sales and branding and marketing and all of those pieces. But that industry was so rife with really, really toxic politics, I think in particular, and maybe at that time in particular, which was like 12 or 13 years ago. Business school for me was a moment to re-look at like what I wanted out of my career and where I wanted to go. For me, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to business school so I can launch my own company. Like I was like very focused on that. Like, and maybe that's why it like came across that I was like really clear on that, because I was like, I'm going to build connections. I'm going to learn so that I can start my own business. But I think, ironically, what I learned is that I need to go back into corporate before I start my business. And I learned that through business school. But I did really have this focus on that kind of entrepreneurial side and using business school to help me be that pivot point to entrepreneurial venture. It just took me 8 more years after business school to actually get into the entrepreneurial stuff.
What you just said is what, like, if I had to define you in one sentence, it's entrepreneur. And so I want to go back even further to like the beginning for Sarah Spoto. What do you think I need to know about your experience growing up, your childhood, to understand like who you are today?
So I have an identical twin sister. I feel like that's like really shaped my identity. And I'm not even sure I can fully articulate how, but like, I always tell people, like, if you don't have a twin, I feel sorry for you, because and I understand some people do not get along with their twins. Okay. Like, I understand that that's a thing and that's difficult. But for those that do, you're basically growing up with your best friend and and because we're identical, like someone who's very much like you. And there's that friendship that you can count on for your whole life. And I also have friends that I've had for a long time, but nobody really has a friend who they've had since birth, literally, unless you consider, someone else in your family, your friend, right, at that level. So yeah, I think that kind of has shaped that. And like my mentality towards like relationships and friendships, and also like identity for myself. I say that because, my parents were very, they made a point of making sure that we were also treated as individuals, because we look exactly the same, or we looked exactly the same. And so they never dressed us the same. They put us in different classrooms. And on our birthday, we had 2 birthday cakes. Like there was this real intention around having our own unique identities. So I think what that manifested in is we had a strong sense of self as individuals, but then you have the support of each other as twins who get along in particular. So
what did that look like early on, you each finding your own sense of self and curiosity? And were you ever drawn to the same things?
Yes, we were definitely drawn to the same things, but I think because as a twin, like, and especially as twins who want to like do their own thing, right? There was sort of a point where you had to like stake your claim on like your thing. Because so for example, my sister is a successful published author. She's a novelist, Angie Spoto. look her up. She writes gothic. She writes gothic fantasies. But so she kind of, I was also very much interested in like writing and creative stuff. But Angie had that more focus on writing. And so I took my creativity into more of like the visual arts. And when we went to undergrad, we both studied business, but we actually both have double majors. And I did studio art and she did, English or creative writing. And so, yeah, there is kind of a point where you do, I would never want to overstep into kind of like her domain. And probably I would assume she kind of felt similar as I was building like the visual arts side of things.
I love what you said about you feel bad for people that don't have a twin sister. I talk to my sisters multiple times a day, every day. I'm the middle of 3 women.
Oh,
and so
nice.
I feel bad for people that don't have sisters, period.
Yeah.
But you've taken it to the next level. And I love what you said that feels present as we like explore this next chapter of our careers. Like I remember probably more so with my big sister because we're less than 2 years apart. We're not twins, but just the closeness and the competitiveness and figuring out like we both did a lot of the same activities, but then I think really started to come into our own when we each had our own lanes. And I feel that so strongly as adults, like our relationships are matured and deepened because we have such different lives. Like my big sister's a top like criminal prosecutor in the state of Delaware. And my little sister is also divorcing corporate America to pursue the culinary world. And I'm at my best when I'm in my own creative pursuits like this podcast. And I think there's something as sisters, as twin sisters, and even as women where like comparison just sucks the energy out of the room. Sisters have been a gift in that way.
I've never really felt like in competition with my twin sister.
Yeah.
And actually, I have 2 other sisters as well.
4 girls.
4 girls.
Wow.
And I don't feel in competition with them either. I don't know what they would say, but that's how I feel. And I think that's important. And obviously that has to do with like how our parents raised us and who we are as people. But I think when you have that more of like supportive female relationships, it just versus the comparison, and you grow up with that, it kind of informs the type of relationships you want to prioritize in your own life outside of your family. So
that's well said. So fast forward, you went into the corporate world quickly and young. And it sounds like from what you said, in those initial years, had a range of experience that wasn't always positive. Like, what do you think the hard lessons were at that period in your career?
It is true that you can't just show up and do good work and get credit for it in the way that corporate world is designed. And obviously you can think of that very cynically, which I do to some extent, but also it's like on the positive side, it's really figuring out how to advocate for yourself. Also evaluating the environment that you're in, because even if you advocate for yourself and you're still not valued and there are signs that you're not valued, it's probably time to move on. But in the meantime, or before that, try to see if you can advocate for yourself, because just showing up and doing even really good, outstanding work is no guarantee of anything in corporate.
Is there a moment or experience where you think that lesson crystallized?
Working in the fashion industry and it was just like the moment where I was like, oh, okay, so I have to play this political game, to be successful. And you can see that because you can see folks that are, and I think this is a true experience for basically anyone in corporate, right? You see folks who maybe are not as hardworking or who are not as competent as the work that you're delivering, but they're more successful because of the way that they're able to play the game. Also because of biases. There are certain people that in certain groups that will always have more privilege in these spaces because of the way that they're designed. And so, yeah, it's just kind of when you realize that, and that I think is such a stark comparison to school or many people's experience with school, which I hope we give a lot of grace to people transitioning from school to corporate. But in school, on the whole, I think it's more of a meritocracy, right? Obviously it's not 100%, but you have a certain input that you put out and then you get a certain output, right? And you've got your grades and you're sort of, there's some level of objectivity to it. And then when you're in corporate, it's so much more about, at least corporate America, networking and the politics and how you sell yourself and all of these things. And that transition is difficult because you're used to like a certain mode of operating in school. So those first 3 years in corporate, I feel like I learned that lesson and then was really like, oh, I want to start my own business, but ended up going back into corporate. And it was a much better experience the second time having learned that lesson and kind of understanding the limitations of the corporate world and how to like be successful within those systems.
It sounds like to me, you have a really regulated way of, to use your word, seeing the limitations of corporate. I'm not as good at that. I can just get really angry and feel really defeated. And I probably learned that in the accumulation of the 8 years post MBA because I was a field hockey coach. But even funny, I'll just say, before MBA, I was at a high ranking collegiate athletic program in Boston. And I remember by virtue of the woman I worked for, who was the head field hockey coach, she was like, she'd won national championships. She was so decorated. Through her, I learned the politics of that arena and that the men who coached the men's sports that didn't win any games made more money than her. And so I was like, wait, what? And then for me, like our 2 years at Simon and the MBA, I was so green and I like grew so much. And even then it was like things that I was naive about. Like, I think we talked about this recently. I was like, what is Simon Women in Business? Like, I was so new to that world. I didn't get that there was a separate conversation that has evolved so much over the last decade about what it means to be a woman in business. And so I was like, drinking from a fire hose for 2 years. But what I would say is over the 8 years post MBA, like the first consulting firm I was at, which was a huge, predominantly male and Indian tech consultancy. And I remember joining the ARG for women at that. And I was a part of this small committee that pulled the data that was like, you hire 50% female and 50% male, but there's only 12% of directors that are women and 2% vice presidents. I remember kind of the heaviness of realizing that and feeling this conviction of like, I have to fix this here. I think the lesson I learned from that job when I had the opportunity to move on was sometimes you do just have to move on. When I had the offer to move on from that first job, a lot of leaders were calling me to try to get me to stay. And I received a narrative that was, we have to treat our female talent differently. And it was very overwhelming. Looking back on it, I see some of like maybe the misplaced narrative I was getting, because if I went back now, I would say, don't treat me differently, like fix the foundational problem.
Yeah.
What I admire about what you said was you're really good at assessing what's happening and understanding the system at play, and then being able to like make your informed and calculated and aligned decisions. And I think where I've run up against a wall is just kind of the defeat and the overwhelm of the reality of it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a reason I pivoted, this last pivot I made out of corporate, where now I'm doing my own wellness business and I'm doing like fractional CMO work, freelance work. That pivot came about because, it did become one of those things where for most of my corporate career, I was sort of able to like understand the limitations of corporate and keep myself separate from it in a way that was like healthy. But at some point I like lost the plot on it. And I think it's because I moved up quickly in the organization, and you start to see the system, how it is so broken for people who are not white men, honestly, right? And maybe even white men within a certain industry. And by the way, I worked in automotive, so it's like 70% men and same thing, mostly men up at the top. And there was this lot of momentum and energy early on kind of to get female employees into these like leadership positions. But once you get up there, there wasn't the support that was needed to be, have these people be successful because of the way that the systems were designed and the organization was designed and people were incentivized. Like, I obviously knew that objectively, even from the very beginning, but it's another when you put your heart and soul into a business and a team and you're a team leader, and I was launching new businesses for my company. I was building teams and I did become very invested in it. And so to start to to face these roadblocks that were truly unjust roadblocks, it definitely made me very angry. So I guess I just want to say, first of all, I felt the same way. I had that moment as well.
It's like part of the process of learning it and figuring out what to do about it.
Actually, I really needed that anger because it made me realize how much I was putting up with and how much I was not being valued for what I was doing and how and the process of that, how much I was giving up to do that. And so I wasn't getting valued, but also I was giving up so much of my health and, my passion and all of these things. And I also wasn't getting anything in return, really, right? Or getting limited things in return. And so the anger was important for me to be like, okay, this is serious and I really need to make a serious change because of it. But I guess, one other thing I did want to mention, though, despite that, like, I think I was more successful earlier in my career in kind of like compartmentalizing it. And I think it's because something that I learned at Simon, it was in like the supply chain class.
Remember?
Yes.
I loved it.
But it was like the problem 90% of the time is the process and not people.
Ooh. I actually just thought you're going to say the people. The people are the problem.
No. I mean, I believe people are the problem. Let me tell, and I mean that. And what I mean by that is like, we need to hold people accountable.
100%. The accountability matters. And for me, I'm still in it. It's like appreciating all the individuals on a personal level and also like accountability of what's being perpetuated and upheld.
Yes. Yeah. On one hand, what I've observed in my experience so far, right, is that processes, systems, whatever you want to call them, they are incentivize people to act and behave a certain way. And so if there's something broken, it's probably the system. It's probably the process, right? That said, we're never going to have progress if we just blame a system or blame a process, because there are people benefiting from the systems and processes very explicitly, and they should be held accountable. So even though I don't believe in like quote unquote blaming people, and I think blaming the process is right. It's like blame the process, but hold people accountable and hold the people who are taking advantage of the system or most benefiting at the expense of others accountable. So like when folks talk about blaming capitalism, like I understand that and I understand the anger there, but let's hold the people who are benefiting the most from capitalism at the expense of others accountable, like individual people, and not even like individual corporations, like the people who are making the most money at the expense of other people's suffering. Like they should be held, like name them and hold them accountable specifically as individuals, but don't blame, when women are facing extreme levels of burnout now, like post-COVID, new mothers especially, don't put all of the onus on women to fix that problem. Obviously, we should be accountable for our own life and we have to advocate for ourselves. But that is a derivative of the system that we're in and the processes that we're in. So it's like making sure that you're understanding where, I don't want to say blame, but you know what I mean? Like where the trouble is and like who we need to hold accountable to addressing it.
How do you think we do that?
Well, I've thought a lot about this, especially lately. The first thing you do is you take care of yourself. I mean, this is like, this is like a trope or something at this point, but like, it's true. Take care of yourself and then build your community and take care of your community. As far as I can tell, there's like no downside to doing that. Like, like there's no downside to engaging in your community, one that already exists. And by the way, it doesn't have to be local. If you are involved at in a community that's more global or digital or whatever, where do you fit, and like, how can you foster that and build that community? I do suggest doing local community engagement because you'll be exposed to people maybe outside of your bubble, perhaps. But community is like where the change happens. And also I think like that, I think it can be really frustrating or overwhelming to feel like, oh, I'm not doing enough to make change or to make the world better or address these problems that we have. But when you start being involved in your community, you'll see those results. Like you'll see the people benefiting from, and I don't mean just like going out and volunteering. I mean like checking out books from the library. Okay. And you're talking to your librarian and he or she is telling you about the events that they have, and like, that's building community, and that's important. And so, and it helps you realize we're all connected and that the things that you're doing do have impact.
Yeah. And then it's beautifully said. And I think like the process that you just described, that for me is healing what's broken on a local level, on a national and global level. Can that ripple into those corporate structures? Like, can we heal it, or do we have to rebuild it? I think we both sit in that contemplative space right now.
I totally know what you mean. I mean, I guess like on one hand, so much of these structures and systems are being broken down whether we want them to or not right now, that I think then the positive side of that is there is this opportunity to lean into community building and like rebuild them in the way that we want to. But I also firmly believe that like if we get so caught up on like tearing down the system as the only means to driving change, we will never do anything, or anything we do will never be enough. And frankly, it's just not true. Like if you take action and it's only 50% of what you want it to be, that's still 50% impact. Like it's I think it's misguided. Yeah, exactly. Like, and sometimes not going all the way means you can make more change than if you would only accept 100%, if that makes sense.
Yes. And it's a perfect segue because as you just illustrated that, I thought a lot about your journey in discovering that for yourself. And it made me want to come back and say, it starts with the I, and it starts with the individual. You said the first step is take care of yourself. And so I want to go back to, in all of that reckoning and discovery and personal growth, you were in a big corporate job that took you abroad. I think this is correct. You spent 8 years working at GM.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
That took you to China and then Switzerland. And what drew you to that experience? And I think, what did those years teach you about who you are becoming now?
So I actually really wanted to work at General Motors specifically because of how multinational they were and global they were, because I knew that I wanted, if I was going to have a corporate experience, I wanted to have a global corporate experience. That was something that was important to me. I think most notably, like the most powerful part of that experience is like living and working somewhere where, your native language is not the language that's primarily spoken, because it just means that you are like constantly uncomfortable. Hopefully you're learning the local language. And in my case, I was. So Mandarin and then German or Swiss German. And you kind of like suck at it, obviously, at first. And even
also,
if you're like good by the books.
Very different languages from each other, and very different from your native language, obviously.
Oh my God, yes. Although I have to say, like, learning Mandarin first was good because like linguistically no shared words or structure or even the shape of the characters, right? With Mandarin to English. And so it's like one of the hardest languages you can learn from English as a native English speaker. So then German seemed like a walk in the park, but it's still hard, obviously. So it's quite an experience every day for even mundane tasks to be uncomfortable and vulnerable over and over again. And by the way, I recognize that people have that experience in America if they're immigrants, but also if they're not part of the majority, that's their experience every day. And so, I think though, coming from a country where, I'm a white person, which, and I have white privilege and I speak the native language perfectly, and all the privileges and benefits and ease that comes with that, like being able to strip that away and have a different experience where you're more vulnerable and more uncomfortable is good for someone like me to have that, because it gives you a different perspective that you can take home with you.
You talked about importance of community and being with community, and I see that so reflected in Badii, and we'll get to what you're building now.
Yeah,
but
great.
What was it like leaning into and discovering community abroad in either place? And then, I know so much of this discovery was in Switzerland.
Yeah, it was very different in both places. In China, I did have a strong connection with the expat community, and the expat community there is so diverse. It's literally people from all over the world. It's super cool. There are not even really that many Americans necessarily in my friend group there. But then also I had friends I do have friends that are Chinese. And so that's a different experience of building community with local folks, which is really powerful and really cool. And you get to learn so much about their culture as Chinese. But then in my expat community, you get to learn about all these different cultures from all over the world. But then, in Switzerland, there was less of an expat community. And actually, the semantics are important. Like in China, I considered myself an expat because I was there basically on an expat package with my company. And I was there for, a set period of time, kind of like a specific project, and I got special benefits as sort of an expat, expat contract. In Switzerland, I considered myself an immigrant because I had no set contract length or project length. I was on a local contract. I was basically treated just like a local Swiss employee. And also that my mentality was different. Like in China, I knew I wasn't going to be there for the long term. Whereas for Switzerland, my intent actually was to stay there for a lot longer than I ended up staying. And so that community is very different, like experience-wise. But I learned a lot, especially about how the Swiss build community and their perspective on taking care of everyone because it benefits everyone to do so, and valuing people's access to nature and to clean water and to healthcare and to, the things that everybody needs to thrive, to survive, but then also to thrive, and how they kind of recognize the importance of that. And that really led me to becoming involved in the bathing culture community, because bathing plays a key role in Swiss culture, like more broadly. The Swiss are landlocked, but they have these beautiful lakes and rivers, and people swim in them because they're so clean. And there's this culture of swimming in these, these wild bodies of water. Then you have the sauna culture that's come from, the Nordics, and from Germany. And then you also have the thermal springs, which is very Swiss. And you have thermal springs in the mountains, and sometimes they're cold springs and sometimes they're hot springs, but they're really these mineral-rich sources. And in each of those cases, it's all an opportunity for people to get together to do something, that's out in nature, that's really more healthy and community focused and accessible. They aren't inherently luxuries like they are in many other places around the world. Yeah, and I think that's what really appealed to me when I was thinking about, starting a business. I'm like, I have to bring some pieces of this culture, this Swiss bathing culture, to the States, where I felt like we can really benefit from it, and from that mentality around health and community and nature as well.
I'm really interested at this moment in your life, in this chapter, this seemingly intense juxtaposition of what you're experiencing in your corporate culture and it kind of coming to a head
Yes.
for you personally.
Yeah.
But you're in a Swiss, you're also being immersed in everything you just said, which feels so opposing. And so what was that intersection for you personally? And what was a truth that came out of that for you?
Yeah, I feel like every day the irony was not lost on me. because like this would be my average day. Okay. I had this incredible apartment. I was so lucky. I lived in Baden, Switzerland, which is, it's the home of the most mineral rich water in Switzerland. So it's basically a spa town. Amazing, right? I lived there because I had been living in Shanghai, 25 million people. And I was like, I want to live in like basically a village. Okay. Which actually Baden is considered like a larger town in Switzerland. And I was right on the river. And so I'd wake up and I could hear the river. I could see the river. Oh my gosh, amazing. The nature, whatever. I'd walk to the train station. Public transit in Switzerland is incredible. I love it. It was safe, clean. It is expensive, but just really wonderful, on time, readily available and accessible. And so I would take public transit, this incredible public transit, like to my corporate job where I was like beat down, you know what I mean? Still American corporate culture, honestly.
Right. You can't escape
in that
it,
environment.
even abroad.
Even abroad,
Yeah.
Even abroad, it was that American. It would have been very different if it was a Swiss corporate culture, actually. Sure. So yeah, the juxtaposition, like the contrast, was not lost on me on a daily basis. But I was really using like the bathing culture, which was for me. You know, I did the Zurich Triathlon, so I actually did all my swim training outside. I didn't go into an indoor pool at all. I did swims in Lake Zurich with my friends to train. Or, you know, we would take a sauna boat out on Lake Zurich. I would go to the spa in Baden, that's just down the road from me, or the free thermal baths that are available to the public out there. So I was doing all of these kind of things, also just like to kind of like survive the high stress environment that I was in. And even though it was very difficult from a work standpoint, what I was going through, I still, on the whole, had just a really wonderful experience in Switzerland because of all the systems. And now we go back to systems, but you know, like public transit and clean water. And I could go to the grocery store and I knew that the food was fresh and safe to eat. And, you know, that does make stress in any part of your life easier to handle. So it was critical.
So a truth about you that has always existed, as at least as long as I've known you and before, is entrepreneur. And so what was that moment of deciding this is what I'm going to do now? Walk us through that.
One of the reasons I didn't start a business right out of business school is because I wasn't in a financial position to do so. I think at the time, like 8 years ago, there was this idea that entrepreneurs, you know, like Mark Zuckerberg style, right? Like college dropout, you know, went and started their business when they're really young. Well, most of us can't do that because we have student loans. And even if we don't have student loans, we don't have savings. So, you know, it's like I got a piece of advice from my favorite professor, Professor Dennis Kessler, you know, which was basically like, again, take care of yourself first, get into a good financial position because you're going to be a more successful entrepreneur if you have your own personal finances in order and you can give yourself that breathing room to make the right decisions and so forth. So that was the best piece of advice. And also he said, you know, go into corporate, get experience. And I learned so much, like so much. It's so important to get experience and to get into a good financial place. So once I had those two pieces, I mean, I had those two pieces long before I went to even China, or maybe not long before, but before I went to China.
That's great though. It takes discipline, and it doesn't come without thoughtful planning and compromise. And you know, I had this conversation with someone else on this podcast. Getting aligned with what you want to build, it's not that it happens like without some challenge and some hard decisions.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And it was a very difficult decision for me to leave because I had built a career at GM, and I mean, I also loved the job I was doing and I loved my team. I still do. But you know, my health was taking the back seat and I was facing some of those roadblocks I mentioned earlier in the conversation. And so I was not in an environment where I was really thriving and I was really putting myself on the back burner. And so, but I did try to, I looked at, for me, I knew I had to look at all possible options. I did spent so much time just understanding, okay, do I need a different job at the same company? Do I need another job at a different company? I ran through like a million scenarios. And by the way, I worked with a career coach. Her name's Kelly Brown. She's amazing. But ultimately, I also really knew the answer from the beginning, but I had to do all the analysis because that's who I am.
You go through the exercise to land at the thing that you know in your gut. And so what was that thing?
Well, starting my business, of course. Yeah. And I was just like, I kind of always had this sense of, well, I'm going to stay with my company until it's not the right fit for me anymore. But I'm not really sure I want to go to another one at this time. I want to do my own thing and see how that goes. And at least, like, it's not to say I won't work in corporate in the future. I probably will because I have a long career. But I want to give this a shot. Like, it's important for me. It's always been a goal for me. I would never feel fulfilled if I didn't, I have the means, I have the experience. And if I just did what was comfortable, that just wouldn't sit right. Like this was my moment to do it. All the signs were pointing to it, and even this idea, for so long, I didn't have a specific idea of a business. And suddenly I had that on top of everything else. And it's like, I would be a fool not to do this right now. It was like truly all the signs were pointing to doing it. So, yeah.
You said all the signs pointed to this is the time. Was there a part of you that resisted that truth that the time was now? What was that voice? Like, what was the part of you that resisted?
I think, well, for me, it sort of manifested as like financially. I was like, no, like I always need to be saving, because I had been in that mode for so long, like first trying to pay my student debt down and then trying to build savings and investing. And so I had this like mindset of like, oh my gosh, I always have to have a huge chunk of savings happening or else like I'm not going to feel comfortable. So that was like something I had to like let go of. And I worked with a financial advisor. I highly recommend this, by the way, like surrounding yourself with support.
You're good at investing in the support you need. It's really, I admire that self-awareness. And which goes back to community, right? Like anytime I've worked on something I've loved, it's not done in isolation.
Yeah. And even if it is, it either is then short-lived or not as good as it could be, probably. But I understand the urge to like hold on to it yourself. But yeah, it does make a difference to like surround yourself, like I have a career coach, I have a financial advisor, get yourself a good accountant, like someone to give you legal advice, whatever, your stylist, like if you can afford it, or if not, like people in your life who can provide that, to some extent, right?
Okay, so that resistance, that second guessing what did it feel like in the beginning stages of deciding this is happening now? I'm gonna step towards this.
The beginning was amazing. I was like so confident in my decision and I felt an immediate release, right? Like obviously I was so burned out. So you start prioritizing your health, and especially if it's deteriorated quite a bit, those benefits, you start seeing them pretty quickly, which is good. I used to get like really debilitating migraines and vertigo and things like that when I was working, and they went away pretty quickly once I started paying attention to like creating an environment to address that. And so there was like this immediate like release. But I think it became harder like a few months later. And I'm starting to come out of that a little bit, but I still think I'm in it a bit because you're sort of like in the beginning, you're buoyed by this like momentum and you're like, and it's the right thing to do. And hopefully you have support systems that are saying like, yeah, do it. And they can tell that you're happier doing it. But then you're like, things don't always work out exactly, right? Of course, that, but there's definitely still financial pressure, and you're like, okay, am I doing with my business and am I focusing on the right things? Am I hiring the right contractors? Like, am I spending my time in the right way? And sometimes, the results are delayed. A lot of times the results are delayed, especially I think in this like kind of crazy market we're in. And so you do start to wonder, am I doing the right thing? But all these entrepreneurs that I've spoken to have always said, that's when you keep going. Don't stop. And in some ways, it's almost like it doesn't matter to an extent what you do, like keep going, because what defines people as successful or not is like, were they able to push through that kind of period? So
Ooh, that gives me goosebumps. I told you,
yeah.
my little sister and I are going through similar pivots, just like you and I are. And it's so funny. She went from being a healthcare consultant with a big firm to working. She went through culinary school and she works in a really intense kitchen in Philadelphia.
Wow.
And
Oh my gosh.
she's like, I almost want to get it tattooed on my arm. She just keeps saying, keep moving forward. Just keep moving forward. And
Yes.
I think it really speaks to how hard change can be. Like life and our habits and what we were used to looked so different a year ago, even less than that. And it brings me, I think, to like the power of Badii and what you're building, because it starts with taking care of ourselves. And so talk to me about what Badii is and this connection to what it is to heal and take care of yourself, which I see so truthfully in your personal experience over the last, several months.
Yeah. So my vision for Badii is to really bring the best of those, elements of the Swiss bathing culture that I experienced, which is connection, centeredness, nature, health, bringing those and community and bringing those to the US in a way that's like tailored to the US and really North America more broadly, but certainly the US. I think as an American, recognize how much we can benefit from those types of those pieces of the Swiss culture, Swiss bathing culture specifically. And so the vision hasn't changed. I think the way that Badii kind of like shows up will continue to evolve. Like right now we have the Badii Talk podcast where we, bring in experts in the bathing world to talk about topics like phone etiquette and how to like stay centered, or, like I mentioned, we just brought in a sauna entrepreneur who has her own mobile sauna business, and now she's trying to expand into retreats to, bring this sense of community and centeredness to more people. Or we dig into Swiss bathing culture or Finnish bathing culture and the things that we can learn about history to inform like our practices today. So that's one side, and kind of creating this community through Badii Talk podcast. But at the same time, I'm building out a physical sauna space here in Connecticut, near Hartford, outside, closer to West Hartford area. So we can start, exposing this specific community to more sauna experiences or thermal bathing experiences. I can also see the business expanding into, bringing high quality sauna and bathing products to bathers through, an online boutique or whatever that might be. But the core of it is trying to create a bathing culture and community in the States that really capitalizes on what I think is the best of Swiss bathing culture, but in a way for America.
You're going to laugh at me because sitting next to me on the ground on Memorial Day, I bought one of those sauna blankets.
Oh my gosh, did you? Those look so funny to me.
What I'm laughing at, the idea of me laying on the ground alone in this blanket, is part of the best part of the culture you're bringing to the US through Badii is the community.
It is the community.
And not me laying alone on my ground.
I know. I think that's so funny. It's so American. And it's like, it's not to say, by the way, like heat exposure, cold exposure, or contrast therapy has benefits, obviously.
But it's missing a key ingredient.
Yes, because that's where the magic really happens. That's where people feel that connection and the mental health benefits happen through that. Those anecdotal benefits that are so important. So yeah, I mean, it's good. Like on one hand though, it's like, you know what? Good. Get the sauna blanket, like whatever gets you in, but then get out into the community, hopefully, as those become available to you. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we had this conversation so I could learn that lesson again and again. Okay. There's something in the physical experience of all of it the connection with nature you talked about, that to me, just to selfishly connect it to my podcast, is like a truth teller. Does that resonate for you? And if so, how?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Oh, I think bathing experiences are always truth tellers. They're so intimate. If you go to Germany, you're going to probably have a naked sauna experience. And like that is obviously revealing, obviously, in a obvious way, but also it starts to normalize. Like, I think in the States, because we have a lot of stigma around being naked and stuff, it can negatively affect, I think, women's self-perception and their self-esteem. And to be in those spaces with other women, especially like in naked environments, like it can actually really help you realize like everybody is human and those commonalities that you have. And so there's a truth that's revealed through that. And so all these bathing experiences, because they're like inherently intimate and to some extent vulnerable, or make you vulnerable, right? They do reveal some truth about yourself or the culture that you're in or the community and the folks that you're with. So absolutely. That's why I love bathing, because it's like, it's something we all do. We all bathe, obviously, right? It's like the human experience, but it's also this luxury when you think about the connection or maybe like sumptuous or something is a better word, where you're like, connecting, really, truly, finally slowing down and connecting with other people and nature and yourself because of the heat and because of this different environment, because of the water or whatever it is. So I think it is really powerful.
There's some connection for me in your experience of the accessibility of it. It isn't something for the elite. And also there's something right now for me in creating something on your own that I used to really think, oh, that's for people that like that's reserved. I hate to say this, but the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world.
Yes.
And there's a demystification, if that's a word, to that it's available to all of us, or we should make sure it's available to all of us.
Yeah, that's another piece of what I'm trying to build with Badii, is like a dichotomy in a way, because luxury, when we speak of luxury, it means that some people are excluded. But I guess, what I'm trying to communicate with Badii is like everybody should have access to these luxury experiences around bathing, because that's what makes, these are all shared human experiences and we should have access to them. And that's what makes life rich, and why I think, Switzerland has such a wonderful Swiss people have wonderful lifestyle and balance, because they have nature, access to nature and clean water and community and connection and health. And there's no reason why those things need to be just for certain type of people. So, it's fundamental to have both that luxurious side of it and the experience, but the accessibility of it.
What from building in your corporate years have you brought to Badii? And is there anything that you had to unlearn to build Badii in a way that feels right?
Oh, well, I definitely learned a lot from corporate. I mean, my expertise is in brand strategy. And so I was super focused on building a good brand from the very beginning. And I spent extra time and extra money to do that. And I think it's really paid off. And, I did it there was some level of risk, because I was building a brand before I had really even confirmed or validated the business model. But I felt it was important because I'm building not just a business, but also a community. And so I wanted to have strong brand values like articulated. And so for sure, like my experience working for some really big brands in my career, like I learned that rigor around brand strategy and brand identity and those pieces. But obviously, like, when you're an entrepreneur, you're just like in the nitty gritty a lot more. Like I became more of a strategist on the corporate side. And so it wasn't so much that I had to unlearn it, but I think it was just like, it was actually really frustrating to learn. When I had my team, when I was working at Cadillac, like I knew I had a social media manager, and he had an agency to create the content and the posts. And so like there were these layers of other folks doing that work, and I could be more strategic. Well, now I'm doing all of those things. It can be really frustrating to like start to have to learn those things, but it was worth the time. And it was important to me, even with the podcast, I didn't hire an editor at first. I did everything myself because I wanted to like learn from the ground up everything. And when you're in corporate, you don't have the time or the capacity, and the company doesn't, that's not what they hired you for. When it's your own business, there's so much value in doing that. But obviously that can be frustrating. So get through that frustration because it's worth it to know how to do those things.
You said you started before you validated the business model. Do you think that was intuition?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because I have expertise in branding, I felt pretty, and I still feel pretty confident in my intuition around branding and building brands. And intuition is obviously informed by experience. And so I was like, yeah, and a lot of times, a lot of the decisions I'm making as an entrepreneur are gut decisions. But this goes back to like what we were saying. My gut decisions 8 years ago, not as valuable. My gut decisions now, pretty darn valuable. So I'm trusting them.
Were your gut decisions 8 years ago? Were they right at the time?
I don't know.
Or were you not? Or are you suggesting that in hindsight, you weren't actually listening to your gut?
You know, the more life experience I have, the better my gut is about things, the more correct my intuition is, right? But you're right. I mean, I think also you have less confidence following your gut when you're like 23, right? But it's not to say you shouldn't. But now I know, decisions I made when I was 23 on a gut decision, now I know with confidence why they were correct. And like, I have more life experience to see why they are right or wrong or whatever. And so you just build more confidence in your gut decision and your intuition. At least I did, like over time.
Someone asked me yesterday, what do I think the biggest thing I've learned about myself in the last 12 months is? And it was that I can listen to myself. And it was always the first instinct to ask everyone else what they thought I should do.
Oh, yes.
And kind of crowdsource and get some data. And that's fine. And it has a place. But now I value making sure I have space to connect with what I actually think.
That's such a good point.
And a great spot to do that is in a sauna.
Oh, it really is. It really is, because otherwise we just don't slow down enough.
Yeah. I could talk. We could talk for hours, clearly,
I know,
and we have.
Yeah.
And we have. Okay, fill this out. The truth is, I used to think blank, but now I know blank.
Oh my gosh, that's such a okay. The truth is, I used to think health was important, but now I know it is. Did I do it right?
Yeah, there's no wrong answer.
Yeah, but that's right. I knew it as a concept, but dang, once your health starts to go, that's everything.
What does success look like for you today versus before when you were in corporate or whatever?
Well, for me, like my routine right now is like I always get morning sunshine. There's, besides the like neuroscience benefits, spending the morning, either way, I'm talking like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, like outside, I read a book, I have my coffee, and does not matter the weather. It'll be like raining and I'm out there. I just won't bring the book. But like that represents to me, that's just one part of my day that's only 15 minutes that theoretically I could have done when I was in corporate, but I didn't do it because I just wasn't prioritizing even 15 minutes, 5-10 minutes of time to do something like that for my own health and well-being. I wasn't doing it. And now I'm doing it, and I'm doing a lot of other things too, like strength training and yoga and other things, going for walks. But that I do this no matter what. I always get out and get that 5 to 15 minutes of sunshine in the morning, which I think represents how my schedule and like my routine and my habits are just reprioritized. That's the first thing I do in the day. And it's just like for me and for my health.
If a listener is feeling the tug to change their life, what's the first question you want them to ask themselves?
What do my bank accounts look like? I'm serious, because I know it doesn't sound like fun, but like get a clear picture of what your financial situation is, because obviously that's going to inform whatever pivot or decision you make. And if you have a clear look at that and you have some flexibility, then you can stomach a certain amount of risk. And if you don't have that, then start thinking about how you can get that and start, if you're like, I don't have enough money to quit my job, well, then try to make a plan to get that. I know I don't mean to be pedantic because like, I know people are struggling right now, but if you have the ability to do so, get that in order first. Obviously, though, the exception being, I think like if it's like killing you, you have to make a change. And I fully support that and figuring out and leaning on your support system to make that work too.
All right. What's the most important truth you're living by right now?
Okay. I don't know if this is exactly what you're going for, but like maybe you're feeling this too. But when you make like a big pivot, it's a great moment to like embrace things from like your youth or whatever that are like, and like just have like more fun with stuff. And, because I feel like, especially like you're building your career in your 20s into your 30s and you're like, you kind of start losing all the hobbies and the things that you liked and were fun. And, okay, yeah, you still go out with friends, but it's like you're going out for drinks, you're going to brunch, like, and so like adding in these things, obviously for me, it's like sauna and bathing, but it's also like I read way more and I have this little Instagram where I do like book reviews on like fantasy books, stuff like that. It's like just like building in the joy. So yeah.
I really love that. Where should people look for Badii? Where should listeners go if they want to be a part of it?
Well, you can find us on Instagram at badii.life. That's BADII.LIFE. And we have an Instagram presence. But if you want to go to the podcast or listen to the podcast, which I hope you do, it's the Badii Talk podcast. You can find us on Spotify, on Apple, Amazon, YouTube. You can also find links to the podcast on our website, which is badii.life. So BADII.LIFE. And yeah, if you want to get in touch with me, you can just contact me through Instagram, send a DM. but yeah, I hope you check out our Instagram and I hope you really follow Badii Talk too, because we're starting to have some really interesting guests and interesting topics of conversations on there about bathing culture.
And I'd be remiss to not ask this because I would love to. I think it's important. If a listener has never experienced bathing culture, sauna, and is like, this feels foreign, what is this? What's a good place to start outside? Like, I think following Badii is a good place to start.
Follow Badii. Yeah. Actually, go to Badii Talk and listen to some of the early episodes. But otherwise, I would say try to find it in your community, and you can start small. Like if you go to the gym and there's a gym sauna or a steam room, like go in there one time. And it's okay that you don't fully know the etiquette, especially in like a gym, steam room, or sauna. Like just go and get the experience and see if it resonates with you. I would also talk to your friends about it because a lot of folks have exposure to bathing culture in one way or the other. And it'd be interesting to see what have your friends done. Can you come along with them as they go to their community sauna, or like you do, yoga and sauna, or wild swimming, which is just like swimming out in nature, right? Like, or doing a cold plunge in nature. I'm sure, people have in their network folks that do all this stuff because bathing is so universal. But yeah, just start close to home.
I love it. Makes me want to go jump in the ocean.
Yeah, I definitely want to.
Well, it's such a privilege to be able to reconnect with you and follow what you're building, like brand entrepreneur #1 in my network. And I'll be so excited to see where the brand is in a couple months and just watch it keep growing. Thank you so much, Sarah. My conversation with Sarah today was such a reminder that the rituals we choose to cultivate in our lives, whether it's a sauna, a swim, or something as simple as morning light, are the ways we find our way back to ourselves. And sometimes they're also the practices that carry us into the next chapter of who we are becoming. When I left my job earlier this year, I got on a plane to Copenhagen. And funny enough, 24 hours later, I was plunging into the Baltic Sea and sitting in this ritualized community sauna experience for the first time. Sharing that ritual with others was unforgettable. It felt like a real marker of my next chapter, and the mental and physical peace I experienced was unlike anything. So I love that Sarah is focused on making more of these kinds of experiences possible and accessible through Badii. Be sure to follow Badii on Instagram and check out the Badii Talk podcast. She's doing such a phenomenal job making it a gathering place for experts, practitioners, and newcomers alike. I know I can't wait to keep learning from her. So for this week, whether it's water, heat, or fresh air, I hope you find a ritual that brings you back to yourself and closer to others. Thank you so much for listening to The Truth Is. I'll see you next time. I hope you leave this episode with something that stays with you, a question worth holding or an insight worth following. If today's conversation resonated, I'd be so grateful if you subscribed, left a review, or shared it with someone you'd like to invite into the conversation. You can also follow along at The Truth Is Podcast. A special thank you to the people who make this show possible. Editing by Dan Kroll, music by Will Savino, visual identity by Sarah Gaynor and Jonathan Bush, and guidance from my friend and advisor, Natalie Tulloch. I'm Catherine Flashner. Thank you for listening to The Truth Is.